Welcome back, everyone. I'm Julia, your host of the Mentorship podcast, a series that features diverse industry professionals. We mentor you by highlighting different fields and going through our guests' academic and career path, from high school to their current role. In today's episode, we are joined by Stephanie Curcio, the CEO and co-founder of NLPatent. Stephanie holds a bachelor's degree in neuroscience from the University of Toronto and a law degree from Western University. After building a career as an intellectual property lawyer, Stephanie ventured into the entrepreneurial world, co-founding NLPatent, an AI-driven patent search and analytics platform. In our conversation today, we dive deep into Stephanie's career path and discuss how she combined her passion for both science and law. So now, here to mentor you, it is Stephanie Curcio. Welcome, Stephanie, to the Mentorship podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you feeling?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, you have such a diverse and interesting career. There's so much for us to talk about. So I'm so happy to have you on to really share it with our audience and to have you mentor us.
Great.
So I'm going to start right from the beginning to really get a sense of who you are. My first question for you is, what did you want to be when you grew up, and what kind of things interested you when you were younger?
Okay, this is a funny question. So apparently, when I was a kid, I would tell my parents that I wanted to be a movie director. Oddly specific, a movie director. I don't know what kind of kid says that, but apparently I do, which is sort of ironic in a way because I don't watch any movies at all. Zero. Obviously, I didn't end up becoming a movie director, but I have starred in movies such as your podcast. Yeah. And things changed quite a bit over the course of my career and my educational journey, and I'm sure we're going to dig into some of that later.
Yeah, this first question is always so interesting to hear what people say. Sometimes people say things that, they ended up going through that path, and some are always fun ones. Like we've gotten, I wanted to be Britney Spears, I wanted to be a pop star, which is actually what I would say too. So I think things like film, movies are things that we see when we're younger, and they're so cool, and we want to be a part of it.
I agree, and it's funny, like when you're a kid, you don't know how many jobs there are out there and all the things that you could do. And you don't even really discover that through early university experience. You still think, okay, a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, and maybe a movie director.
Yes. And that's exactly why I wanted to start this podcast, is to shed light on different types of careers, because I struggled with that so much in high school, not knowing what was out there for me and not even giving myself the space to know that I can learn what's to come. It felt so like you have to choose now, and that's what you're going to be with forever. So let's talk about that phase in high school. What courses were you taking? What were you dabbling in? What were you kind of preparing for university?
Yeah. So classic overachiever. I started in grade 5 through the gifted AP, PACE program, and then I was in AP through high school. So I focused obviously on math and science because those were all the AP courses. And although I loved math and science, well, more science than math, I also really liked to write. So I would write in my free time. I enjoyed history classes and other things that were more liberal arts focused. And when it came down to selecting, a university path, which to your point, you think this decision is going to completely guide and direct the rest of my life, which is so not true.
Yeah.
I was stuck. What do I want to do? I'm obviously very good at science, math, I guess, as well, but less so. But I really enjoy writing. So I didn't know what was the best career path for me. And I thought that I had to decide when I was 17. And, that's of course not true. So when I was making a selection, I was trying to look at more hybrid programs. And so I was very interested in arts and science programs. I was like, this is my jam. I can do everything that I love without giving anything up. And so that was sort of something I was exploring. And then I decided to go into liberal arts. And I got into Glendon College
No way. I did a year there too during this path. So I feel like you're going to say that you changed.
I did.
Yeah. And that's so funny. I changed. I went to Glendon, then I changed again. Oh my gosh. I feel like there's so many things.
We're vibing. I got in, but I didn't go.
Okay.
So my last minute decision, I was like, no, I don't want to limit myself because I still love science. And then I decided to go to U of T.
Okay.
And I did U of T. My original program was like a specialist co-op program in political science. Whatever that means.
Still liberal arts.
Yeah, liberal arts. I think it was like international relations specifically.
Yeah.
But I wanted to give myself the opportunity to still take science classes, which I did.
Okay.
And, pro tip for anybody listening out there, I think that's the way to do it, because if you do science in year one, you have to take all of the crazy hard classes all at the same time. But because I didn't do that, and I just took them, I took like bio and like, I don't know, psychology, and I think one other math course. I got to spread them out. So I took them in first year, and then I switched into sciences. So
that is a good tip. Yeah, I actually recommend to a lot of people to just try to do something undeclared first year if the school that you're going to offers that or something similar. I ended up doing, after I switched around and after I left Glendon, I decided, you know what? Even though I've switched a couple times, let's do a year undeclared, but in science. So at least I'm still keeping some doors open. It gives people that chance to try different things.
But these are the things that they don't tell you.
Yes.
And you're making a big decision. It's a big life decision, and it's like life altering, but really it's not. Like, you still have so many options, and you can weave your way through different programs, and you can switch schools. You can do so many things to try to finagle your way into whatever program you end up wanting to pursue. So I totally wholeheartedly agree with your approach, and they should really be more vocal about that in career counseling and other things.
100%. So how did you end up getting into neuroscience and choosing that as your major during your time at U of T?
So I just really loved psych, and I had an awesome prof. He was like amazing, and I've kept in touch with him here and there. I obviously did really well, and I thought what really interested me about psych was more about the brain, really, and how it functions and all of the chemistry involved. And so I ended up declaring that as my major, and I went into neuroscience. And what was so cool about neuroscience is that there's so much left like unknown, like uncharted territories. It's such a crazy thing. It's like, this is the brain. This is the most important organ in your body, but we know so little about it. And so when I started, when I got into neuroscience, you buy a big textbook that is meant to carry you through 3 years. So second year, third year, fourth year. And by the time I was in fourth year, like a lot of the stuff was wrong. Like they were just like, yeah, that's wrong. Like you would cross it out and like write down it's crazy. This is a textbook that is literally, the pace of innovation, the pace of research is so quick and is ongoing throughout, the time I was in school. That stuff in the textbook, literally in the textbook, was plain wrong by the time I was in fourth year.
That's so interesting.
So it's quite a broad field, and a lot of it more is like soft sort of neuroscience, which is more psych, and then quite a bit of it is also more bio and chemistry focused. So what I got really interested in was neurodegenerative disease.
Okay.
And so I got into a research lab with an awesome PI who I adored. Professor Joanne Nash, if you're listening out there, you're awesome. And she was just such a wonderful person to work with. And I was still an undergrad when I started with her. And then I stayed with her for 2 years while I was still like figuring out what I was going to do next.
So let's talk about then kind of as you were approaching the end of your undergrad and you're learning more about which part of neuroscience you're most interested in and starting to learn more about your career and yourself too. What were your plans for when you graduated?
I had no idea. I was thinking, okay, well, like I'm pretty smart, so I should obviously just go to med school. Because that's the only job that there is. And of course, that's not the case, right? But, when you're starting out in university and then you continue on being a sort of like a top performer or like a top achiever, you think, okay, well, I must go to med school then, because that's just like the epitome of being good at science, right? So I still thought that I was going to be a doctor. So I graduated undergrad. And I wrote the MCAT.
Okay.
And it was hard.
Yeah.
And I packed up my bags and I flew to India, and I volunteered in southern India for a month in a hospital.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, like I'm going to go and save the world. I'm going to help people with my hands. And you get there and you're like, holy crap, there's a real problem here. There's like a health crisis happening. And there's like very little that 22-year-old Stephanie is going to impact.
Yeah.
And so that was disheartening. And the level of like lack of hygiene and just like crazy stuff that I saw at this hospital, it just like really turned me off of becoming a doctor, because that's the reason why I wanted to get into medicine, is because I wanted to go out and do philanthropic work and try to, make a difference in the world. And I didn't think that was going to really be possible, because I saw the gravity and the severity of the health crisis that is happening in one small hospital and in a rural part of India, but I'm sure has varying degrees of severity across the rest of the world.
Wow.
But yeah, I gave up the dream. I thought maybe I'll still do it, I have no idea. And then I sort of went back to my PI and I said, okay, what do I do? And she gave me some like really interesting advice. She's from Manchester, so she's got like a nice accent. So you imagine me saying this and I'm in an accent with me. So
you're not going to do it?
No, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to insult anyone, and I'm really bad with accents. So she sat me down and she said, again in her accent, right? She said, I am a tenured professor at U of T. I love science. I breathe science. I dream science. I am obsessed with science. I have sacrificed tremendously in my life to pursue science. Do you love science? And I said, no. Not like that. No, take it away. So she very nicely and calmly sort of like, guided me to perhaps a different career path.
Yeah, I was actually on that path, because my undergrad was chemistry, my master's was chemistry, and I thought I was going to do my PhD. I very much was on that path, and what made me realize I didn't want to continue with it was because I didn't love science that much. You have to dedicate your life to it. Like, it's a part of you, and for some people it is, and that's amazing, but it wasn't like that for me.
Yeah, so this is exactly kind of the message that she was trying to impart on me, and it resonated.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of like, okay, man, like going back to the drawing board, what the heck am I going to do? And so, literally my mom was like, you should be a lawyer. And I'm like, I should? And she's like, yeah. And I went to my PI and I'm like, so my mom thinks I should be a lawyer. And she's like, yeah, I can see that. And I'm like, okay, done.
Interesting. A leap of faith.
Like, I have no good reason, like no reason beyond literally that, to become a lawyer. And so, the rest is sort of history. Well, not even, there's still so much more to the story, but that's my motivation to go to law school. And I actually applied to law school without even writing the LSAT. So I was still on the fence about it.
Okay.
So when you go to law, like when you apply to law school, you have until February of the next year, basically the year that the school is going to start, to write the LSAT. And I think you have to apply in like October or November, or like sometime in the fall. And so I had like 6 months to be like, okay, like, do I really like do some soul searching? Is this something that I want to do? Blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I ended up like, okay, I might as well just write the LSAT, because then my application is not going to be valid if I don't do it. Yeah. So I wrote it in February. I did reasonably well, and I got into a few schools, and I went to Western.
That's amazing. And I think it's interesting too, because, and I think we'll get into this, law sometimes also seems like very specific, but I think we'll see with your case how you can bring in science. And in a way, it's also keeping your doors open. It's not narrowing down, because at first I thought that being a lawyer is kind of narrowing your path, like doctor, lawyer, whatever, but you can diversify it. You can bring science back in. And that was something I was going to ask you, is if you felt like you were neglecting science, but now hearing where you were at, you were kind of ready to see what else was out there. And I love how we'll get into how you were able to bring science back too.
Totally. And I didn't think that I was going to. I was sort of thinking like, okay, this phase of my life is over and now I'm going to be a lawyer, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I can tie that back in, but that's so true what you said. People think about professional school as then you have to pursue whatever that profession is, but it's so not true. You can apply law to a variety of different professions and even medicine. So I have a really good friend who went to medical school who is not a practicing doctor, but he works at a hedge fund in LA for like medical devices, medical device companies. And because of his background and because of his like deep expertise and knowledge in medicine, he adds tremendous value to this organization. So, so interesting how, you think you're making like, this is it. This is the big decision. This is going to determine my whole life, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It just opens more doors.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's talk about your time in law school at Western. Can you also kind of give us a picture of what it was like at Western in terms of the lifestyle there? We have had a lawyer on before, but she went to University of Ottawa. So definitely different atmosphere there. So if you can kind of tell us about this part of your career and how it went for you, especially you taking a little bit of a leap of faith and changing directions.
Totally. So, I went from U of T to Western.
Yeah.
I feel like that I don't even need to say anything else. In terms of like what kind of a different school atmosphere was like. So, it was totally different and I was really into it. And it was a smaller class. I don't know what the sizes are like now, but when I was in law school, our class was 180 students. So it was kind of like a high school, because you kind of know everybody. You have your homeroom with all of your homeroom friends, and there's only 20 people in your homeroom. It was called a small group. And so we were always together, and I formed like relationships with now my best friends in law school. We literally like sat beside each other on the first day, like that kind of thing. So
from what I know too, law school is really about having that support system. Like I remember some of my friends going through it and hearing about it at that time, and they really relied on their study groups. It was not an individual type of program, at least from what I've seen. Whereas science, I always studied by myself. But I think with law school, you need that support.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you were to just go to law school and not talk to anybody and just like write the exams and like be done with it, you would probably do very poorly. They have what we called summaries, where every year the like summary of the course gets passed down to the next year. And you take this summary as like a starting point, and then you like populate it with new information that you learn in your class. And then because exams are open book, so then you take all that and you would like print it all out and you have it on the table ready, highlighted and ready to go, so that you can look things up during your exam. So if you just had the textbook, you're kind of screwed because like you don't know, like there's so much other information in the textbook that you're not going to be able to like quickly leaf through something and be able to pull information. Having this like foundation of like a great summary of a course passed down to you, you have such an advantage. And then you just add to it and you make it your own, and then you pass it on. Like that's like the camaraderie, I guess, of law school that doesn't exist in undergrad.
Did you start to specify a certain area that you wanted to focus on? Do you have that opportunity? And if so, where did you start leaning towards?
Yeah, so I got into law school, and when we talked about what our undergrads were in, mine's in neuroscience. I have a BSc. Oh, you want to go into IP? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, what is IP? And so that was my first real like exposure to IP. I had some like limited exposure to patents and things when I was working in the lab, but like nothing like really solidified in my mind that that's something that I might be interested in. And then this like niche area kind of appealed to me because I have this like superstar like background that's like perfectly suited for this profession, or so I was told. And it just was sort of a natural gravitation. And I joined the IP club at Western.
And it's intellectual property, right?
Yes, intellectual property. Sorry, I should have done.
That's okay.
I take it for granted that people just know what IP is. Yes, intellectual property.
Why is that related to science? Just for people who don't know in general.
Totally. So patents are something that you actually need a technical background in order to be a full-fledged patent lawyer, to write the patent exam. So you become a lawyer and you write the bar exam in your province or state, depending on where you are. And that gives you license to practice law in that jurisdiction. So Ontario bar, I wrote the Ontario bar. I'm a licensed lawyer in Ontario. And then if you want to practice patent law, at some point in your training, you have to write the patent agent exam. And that is a really hard exam. The very low pass rate. It's extremely difficult for some reason in Canada more than the US. And it then gives you license to practice patent law, or practice, like, I guess, to prosecute patents, which means to argue with the patent office on behalf of your client as to why a patent should be granted. But this is all written arguments, sort of thing. And draft patent applications, etc. And to do that, you actually need a science degree, and you don't need a law degree. You just need a science degree.
I was going to ask you about this. Not that it's a myth, but to me it was a bit of a myth because I wasn't sure. But me doing my master's in chemistry and having to look at what career paths could follow, I heard a lot that, well, you could do your PhD in chemistry or any other science and you could be a patent lawyer and you don't have to go to law school. So I'm glad that you confirmed that for me.
So you would become a patent agent, not a patent lawyer.
But then you have to do your exam.
You just have to write the patent bar exam, the patent agent exam.
So you wouldn't be a lawyer.
No.
I see.
So if you are like somebody who says they're a patent lawyer, they're both a patent agent and a lawyer.
I see.
Somebody who is a patent agent is a patent agent but non-lawyer.
Okay.
So that's sort of the difference. So patents are a form of intellectual property that people pursue for inventions. So what is an invention? A lot of people get IP confused. And so I would like to just set this right once and for all. So there's different forms of IP. You have patents, of course. You have trademarks. You have copyright. And then you have trade secrets and other things like know-how. And that's a little softer. So a patent has to be for an invention. An invention is something new, non-obvious and useful, that basically does something, and it just has never been done before. So it has to be different enough from everything that's done before in order to be patented. So a microphone could be patented. All of the technology within the microphone can be patented. Something as simple as a door hinge, or something as complex as a medical device, or a battery, or things like that.
Or chemical compounds.
Exactly.
That's definitely where I was more in the field with. Yeah.
So all of those things can be patented. And a patent gives you the right to exclude others from making, selling, importing that invention within the jurisdiction in which you have patent protection.
And so that gives a lot of good context on how that relates to science too, and how you're starting now to merge law and science. And so what about internships? Did you do any internships as a law student that also allowed you to explore IP and patent law? And also just curious too, if you ever tried exploring other areas through internships, or if you were just focused on IP and patent law?
Yeah, this is a good question. So through my involvement with the IP club at Western, I then, because I can't do anything in moderation, became the president of that club. And that, because I became president of the club, I didn't really know why I wanted to do that, but I just I became the president. And that, because I had to liaise with some law firms and stuff, and IP firms in Toronto and other places to organize things for the club, it allowed me to network with these people in a very organic, non-contrived way that had nothing to do with my career, but more so just my capacity as president of this club. So I had a good network even before I became a lawyer, oddly, which is kind of unusual for somebody like me who doesn't come from a family of lawyers. I am the first person in my family to graduate high school, let alone become a lawyer. So I didn't have that network that some people have. So yeah, that was, it gave me a foot up, I guess, a leg up. And then when I went to apply for internships, I got a lot of interest, and I had like fine grades. Like I wasn't like acing everything like you do in undergrad, because you're in a group of people that are all like A students. But I did well, and then I got a lot of interviews, and I did a couple of internships. So actually just one internship. So I went into I was what do they call it? A summer student at Gowling WLG, which is a big firm that has offices all over Canada and internationally. When I went through that program, it was called Gowling Lafleur Henderson, so it kind of gives me some age. But they're known for being a full service firm, which means they practice all areas of law, but with an exceptional IP group.
Okay.
And the IP group sort of functions on its own. So again, I was like, oh, I really like IP. I think I like IP. I find it at least like interesting. I don't know what it's like to practice IP law, but I wanted to explore it, but I wasn't willing to like totally close down doors. So I was like, okay, I'm still going to be at a full service firm, which means I might have some exposure to other practice areas like during my internship. That ended up not really being the case, but anyways, like that's neither here nor there. But that's the motivation to going for a full service firm rather than an IP boutique.
Yeah, that's good insight too, that there's opportunities like that so that you can kind of try different things if possible. And I also love how you talked about how your involvement with the student club allowed you to open so many doors. I'm such a big advocate for getting involved in student groups. It brings so many opportunities on so many different levels. Some student groups have really large budgets. The one that I was part of had a budget in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I worked my way up to being the president and was a signing officer and had to help make the budget, and there was lots of liability and responsibility. So student groups are such a great way to get experience in the field, and in your case to network. So that's awesome.
I so agree. Yeah, I so agree. People overlook them and just think it's a nice to do or a fun thing to do, but actually it serves tremendous value from a variety of different perspectives.
So as you were finishing your law school degree, what were your plans for when you graduated? And in general, it's necessary to complete an articling process too. So what was your path there and the next few years after law school?
At the time that I finished law school, there was only one option. It was articling. Right. So now there are other options, but there wasn't at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's a pretty new, a new initiative that was started. I don't even know how many years ago, but I finished law school in 2015.
Okay.
So
what are the other options now? Do you know?
So now there's a program called the LPP program, and that allows you to do courses rather than articles. So if you can't find an articling job or like whatever, you don't want an article for whatever reason, you can go through this program that's actually at Ryerson to complete your designation as a lawyer. Because you do need to do something in Canada in order to get called to the bar. So a lot of people don't realize this. Okay. Like I wrote the bar in 2015, right after I finished law school, but I did not get called to the bar until 2016 after I finished articling.
Okay.
So you're not a lawyer until you finish articling.
Okay. And so did you do that in a IP firm?
Yeah, I did it at Gowling's. So I stayed there and I did all sorts of IP, but I really gravitated to patent work. I thought that was really the most interesting form of IP, at least for me. And I really enjoyed the people that I worked with.
I also wanted to ask you just even about the lifestyle in this point of your career, because working in a law firm can be very demanding. It can be very challenging. And I'm wondering what your take was on that and how you were able to kind of balance your personal life too, and just in general, because articling can be a very intense experience for people.
Yes. Articling is very challenging, and the practice of law is extraordinarily different from the education. Yeah. I cannot tell you how much I loved law school. Like obsessed. I did all of my readings. I did everything. I was the keener that would like ask questions and respond and answer questions and all of the things. And then practicing law, I'm like, wait, this is not law school. But like when you think about law school, they teach you the pivotal cases that completely change the law.
Right.
They don't teach you like the day-to-day mundane stuff that you do like, you know, for 95% of your career.
Right.
They teach you that like one big turning point in the law and how that affected sort of like the next however many years. But like the practice of law is just not like that.
And was that something that you thrived in, or was it something that was difficult for you to be able to work all those hours?
I did not like it.
Okay.
No. And it's not because I'm not a hard worker, because obviously I am, but I just like didn't enjoy the work. Like didn't enjoy the mundane, didn't enjoy like the tedious random stuff. It just was like, and it's like you have to do such a massive volume of it.
Yeah.
For so many hours, and you're always sort of like on call. It's like, okay, if a partner sends you something at like 6 o'clock on a Friday and you're like heading to the cottage, guess what? You're not going to the cottage anymore.
Yeah.
I just really didn't like that. You don't have control over your life.
Yeah.
But I mean, I got through it, and it was like, okay, it wasn't awful. I did learn a lot. I had like built some great connections. Some of the work was like quite interesting, but for the most part, it's just like, oh man, this is boring. I didn't just go to school for 7 years to do this like really boring thing.
Yeah. That's a good thing to have to stop and tell yourself and then assess the situation. So at that time then, what were you thinking, and how did you transition into something that did spark your inspiration and your drive?
So I was working with some headhunters to look into other opportunities, and at that time, like literally, like I went to a bar for like an IP event or something, and I ran into a friend from law school who was a year above me. And he was telling me about AI. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. What is that? And he was telling me how he built an application to search case law and how he's building an application to search patents. And I'm like, ooh, patents. I do patents. Tell me more about patents. And so we got to talking, and I was just like really taken by this idea. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Did some research on my own of like what this is, because I had no idea. Spoke with my friend pretty extensively about his experience and what he was building and what he was envisioning and how things were going to look. And I sort of had this like aha moment where it was like, all right, I have a good pedigree. I went to a good school. I worked for a couple of years as a lawyer at a big law firm, very reputable. If I wanted to be a lawyer again, I can just become a lawyer again.
Yes,
like I'm not closing this door.
Yeah.
But this might be a once in a lifetime opportunity to be ahead of the curve in an area where I thought it was so obvious that it was going to make a big change in the profession. It was just a matter of when. This is an opportunity to do something really cool with my life. So, you know, that's just kind of like how things went. And I just quit my job. And yeah, then I started this company, and the rest is like really history now, for real.
And so that's how NLPatent came to be. I would love to first just get a bit more context on the mission of NLPatent before also going into your own career experience with it too.
I think it's important to talk about the problem. So searching and analyzing patent data is really, really hard. It's hard because there are, first of all, hundreds of millions of patents. And secondly, words in patents are extremely complicated. Like you would never use a simple word like a microphone, like to describe a microphone. Like it would be some very complicated, complex, convoluted language that goes into deep, unnecessary at times description of what it does and what it is and how it's like designed and architectured. So using this like crazy terminology to describe simple things makes it very difficult to search through this information. So rather than searching by keyword, you can use NLPatent to just, in plain English, describe what an invention pertains to, or in super complicated terms too. Anything sort of works. And then the AI system reads it, understands that text, and then generates a list of results that's conceptually relevant to that invention description.
Okay.
So it is instant, it's iterative, it's very quick and very accurate. So our clients are often really blown away by how accurate it is because it's an AI system. You know, how can it like outperform a human? But in many, many cases it can. And it does so like within a couple of seconds.
When you started, AI was not what it is now in terms of how it's perceived by by the public. So I also would love to hear too, just how you've been able to evolve with the company.
So in terms of like exposure to clients, like that's sort of an interesting question too, because again, like I've been in the AI for IP space for a long time. So being an early mover in the AI for IP space, and being an IP professional myself, I was really embraced by the IP community as sort of like, okay, tell us about AI, you know? And so I was invited to present on webinars at conferences and just became sort of a thought leader in the AI for IP space. And because of that, I had a pretty solid network of people that I could then, talk to about AI and talk to about different aspects and different features and different products and all of this kind of stuff, and understand how people are thinking about AI. So to your point, 1,000,000%, the perception of AI-based tools has changed tremendously since then to now and like into the future. So having those opportunities also enabled us to gain tremendous credibility in the business.
I also just want to give some context for those listening on what a CEO role entails. I think you are our first CEO.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And we have had co-founders on the podcast before in different spaces, but as a CEO, I don't think we've had somebody talk about that role. And I myself am a CEO, but I don't talk a lot about myself on the podcast. So I do know what it's like. You wear a lot of hats and kind of do everything, especially in the early stages. So if you can kind of give us an insight on what your role is like and even your day-to-day now too, especially now that you're more evolved in the company.
Being a CEO, what does that mean? In the early days, it was like it meant nothing. It's like, okay, me and this person who I've decided to run this business with are going to try to figure things out. And we just do everything. So I just didn't code or do anything related to like the product necessarily. But everything else, I was sort of trying to navigate with my co-founder. Some people start businesses alone. Like, I don't know how people do that. Like, you need a co-founder.
I don't do the coding either. So yeah, I face of everything except for the coding.
Yeah. So that's sort of my vibe as well. And as the company has sort of grown and matured, that role has really evolved and changed, or I guess focused, I suppose. Because of course I did so many things before, and now I'm still doing a ton of things, but I'm trying to spend as much time as possible kind of building our reputation and solidifying ourselves as leaders in the market, and trying to speak to as many people as I can, get speaking engagements, go and like shake hands and kiss babies and do the whole thing, right? But I'm still very involved with like the sales process. I'm still very involved with all of our clients, and it's sort of interesting at this stage because up until very recently, I had personal relationships with every single one of our clients, or at least like the champion at the organization. And now, like, I'm like, who's this firm? Like, who's this? Like, I don't even know who these guys are, which is so weird because I have never spoken to them, but now they're a client of like the company that we started. It's like pretty wild how that happens.
It shows your growth. But then also you have to know to let go of some control too, because you want to be a part of everything. But at some point, things are going to change.
Totally. And I had a great conversation with somebody relatively recently at an event, on a side event as part of Collision in Toronto in the summer. And he was the CFO at one of Canada's like big tech darlings. I don't know if I should say what it is, but it doesn't matter. And I was sort of asking him for advice because he joined at Series A, so their first like big round of funding. And then he stayed on and then left like relatively recently, I think, to start his own thing. And basically I was just sort of asking him, being a leader at a company, he wasn't the CEO, but he was very close to the CEO as a CFO. What can I do today to help my company mature going forward? And one of the big takeaways from that conversation was that he highly encouraged testing, relinquishing control. You don't just like give somebody like full reign to go do whatever they want. You just give them a little leash, see what happens, and then you talk about it, reevaluate, and then maybe you give them a little more leash, and then maybe you give them a little more responsibility. He said because something that a lot of companies do is the founder just has so much control, and then at a certain stage you just can't control, and then things fall off fall off the wheels or the wheels fall off or whatever the saying goes, because that person has never given anybody control, but all of a sudden now they're forced to.
Yeah.
So start practicing that as early as possible. And obviously the biggest thing to be able to do that is to hire really good people and be really, really picky with who you bring on as sort of like the founding team.
Yeah.
So our company is now 12 people, and I consider the whole team as part of the founding team. So we all got together, all 12 of us in a room recently, and I'm like, guys, we fit in a room. Like eventually we're going to be in a conference center, and I'm going to be on like a microphone.
The dream.
It is the dream, but it's also like we can think back about this like cool time we're sitting in an Airbnb and I'm like on the floor doing like a PowerPoint presentation on the State of the Union. It's like really cool to kind of even be here. I'm like really proud. To think of like where we were, like the obstacles that I've had to deal with and have overcome, and how we've grown as a team and as a business, and how much our clients love our product, and it's just like so satisfying.
It's so hard some days, when it's the challenges, you just second guess yourself in every single way, and times where you have to rethink and want to quit even, but you got to believe in yourself. And
I have like 1,000,001 reasons to have quit the business, like up until now. And I just somehow like found it in myself, but also like through a great support system. I mean, I had people obviously supporting me in the background, making sure that I wasn't living on the street while I was going through this like major life change, like going from being a Bay Street lawyer to like a startup founder was really tough. But I don't know, like, I don't even know where this resilience came from. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm like, I don't know. I've never been tested in my resilience until I started this business. And then it's like every day, it's like resilient test, number 1, number 2, and it's just the way it goes. And it's the highs like of something going well, feeling amazing. It makes all of the lows and all of the challenges like so worth it. And it's honestly that like emotional roller coaster that keeps you going. And it's just like, it's so crazy.
Well, this has been such a great conversation. I'm going to go into my last question. What are your hopes for your future career development, and what do you hope to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, like if you asked me this question like a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like I would have given you a different answer. And now I'm just like so obsessed with the idea of applying AI to patent practice and making a very, very significant impact on the profession. I am sort of a harbinger of AI in the world of IP, and that's so cool. I never would have thought I would have been in this position, but I can see tremendous opportunity for so much more growth, and ways to apply an LLM-based AI approach to other parts of the patent process. And riding this wave and, being an early mover, it's just, we're seeing so much confirmation that we're right place, right time, right team, right tech. Like literally the stars are all aligning. And I'm just super excited to keep going with this company. I am like truly, my husband would say that I have an unhealthy relationship with my company. And I mean, I think he's right.
If it's something that's part of you, it's different, right? When you really believe in something, going back to your time at the law firm, you're putting in all these hours, but you didn't really want to do it. And it's not because you weren't good at it. It's just because you didn't have the drive. And I think that's the difference, or the drive for that, for that reason, right? So when you find something that you're passionate about and you can put your drive into that, it might be unhealthy at some points. You need to take breaks, but it's so much more rewarding and reassuring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you my biggest piece of advice for people is just to find anything that gives them tremendous satisfaction. And for me, it's what we're doing and how we're building this amazing business. But it could be something very simple. It could be a hobby. It could be anything, but having that like no sense of purpose and like doing something that you really love, no matter what the sort of the gravity of that thing is, just gives you so much ability to like go on and like be happy and fulfilled.
Yeah. And it can take time. So like, don't put pressure on yourself if you don't know what that one thing is or a few things are right now. Stephanie's such a great example of how things took time, how many different pivots you made, but were able to bring them all together and merge them and So it's just so great to have had you on and to hear about your career and how you were able to merge law and science in such a unique way, and also your experience as a founder as well, and your startup journey. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming on the podcast. This has been so insightful.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And I'm very happy to speak with any of your listeners if they're interested in chatting about anything that I said. I'm happy to pay it forward as I've received so much great mentorship in my life.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Stephanie for coming on the Mentorship podcast. This was such a relatable conversation on navigating the challenges of both academic and career transitions. And it was fascinating to hear how she has successfully merged law and science, both as an attorney and a leader in the tech space. We will be back in 2 weeks with our next episode, where we will be joined with a design coordinator who has an architecture educational background. So be sure to tune in to learn the diverse ways to apply an architecture degree. In the meantime, follow us on @MentProjects on all social media platforms for more updates and mentorship resources. Thank you so much for listening.